My name is Kevin Abstract, and I want to be remembered for being awesome at everything I do, no matter what medium or whatever it is I decide to pick up on a random day, you know?
We have all been there, where we listen to an album and it feels different from anything out there at the current moment. Whether it's hearing a song for the first time that turns you on to an artist for life, whether it's hearing a verse that really connects to you and makes you want to dig deeper. That was me when I heard this album for the first time, Saturation 3 by Brockhampton. It was my first time listening to Brockhampton, only listening because Anthony Fantano wouldn't stop talking about them. Fantano put three of their albums on the number 3 spot on their top albums of 2017. This inspired me to give the newest album a listen, and well, everything would change from here on out. That album, Saturation 3, is one of my favorite albums of all time, and the project is by Brockhampton, a collective of artists and musicians that came together to make something bigger than what they already were. Their main goal in 2017 was to saturate the music industry with an album. This album would be Saturation. It would be the beginning of a trilogy where they would follow it up with 2 more albums in the same year, literally saturating their way into the music industry. What these guys bring to the table is so different from what's already out there, and the group, the main artist being Kevin Abstract, a solo artist that had probably the most fleshed out solo career of all the artists. It was his idea to post on the Kanye West fan forum stating that he wanted to make a band. Although Kevin was very young at the time, he had ambitions, and the seed of ambition would sprout into a successful music career and starting Brockhampton. Kevin is known for his strong hooks, his choruses on tracks, and he also talks a lot about struggling with being gay and also being black in America. His childhood friends also would be in the group, being Ameer Vann and Matt Champion and Merlin Wood. In fact, you can see some really old videos of them rapping together even as kids.
Hello, I'm Ameer Vann, and I like to be remembered for being a rock star.
Ameer was a friend of Kevin ever since they were in school together on the bus. Ameer was also stating that the only reason he started rapping was because he knew Kevin Abstract and Kevin's persistence for Ameer to be an artist. Ameer is known for his verses about his troubled past where he used to sell drugs and rob people. He's mostly known for heavily truthful passages in his verses where he isn't afraid of listing his own faults and reflecting on them.
You almost made me drop my croissants.
Matt Champion is commonly known as the pretty boy in the group, being a lot of people's fan favorite because of his swagger. Matt is known for his cadence and smooth flows on his verses, and he's mostly known in the group for his rap style and smoothness.
This is Merlin Wood.
Merlin
Wood, or just Merlin, he's the group's hype man. His verses mostly talk about deciding not to be a cog in the machine and dropping out of college to be in Brockhampton. They would later meet Don McLennan and Joba, who would eventually join Kevin Abstract's band.
I do not discriminate. I am on a pilgrimage, so don't try to insinuate.
Dom, living in an entirely different state, would move to Texas and San Marcos to be in the band with them. Don McLennan is probably the most talented rapper, as his verses are usually incredibly introspective and self-aware, and he constantly experiments with different flows on each track.
Shout out to Planet Grievous.
Joba at first was only going to mix tracks for Kevin, but when Kevin brought up him joining Brockhampton, Joba eventually decided that he would take on Kevin's offer and be a lead member in the band. Joba is known for his impressive singing ability, and he's pretty sporadic, where on some songs he's going off really hard, but in other songs he can sing a very somber lullaby, for example. This man is pretty talented.
That was incredible! The important thing about sports is that your favorite team gets the most points, and that's all that matters.
And then there's Bareface, who's from Belfast, Ireland, was in a couple small bands at the time before taking Kevin's offer to join Brockhampton, literally being from another country. Bareface became more fleshed out in the band on later albums, especially on 2019's Ginger, where he pretty much carries that album, if you ask me. He's known for his very impressive singing ability, especially during the Saturation trilogy, where he sings on almost every single closer on the album in that trilogy. He does doesn't appear as much throughout the trilogy as he would in later albums where he would be more of a mainstay member. He's more on the Saturation trilogy sporadically, mostly there to create more tension or impact in a song, but again, he's used very sparingly. There are other members in the group like Romil, Jabari, Kiko, who are the main producers in Brockhampton, and people like HK and Ashlyn who work on artwork for the band. So when Brockhampton was making this album, they were on a creative high. Their previous albums have done very well. They finally were able to move out into Los Angeles and quit their jobs, and they were basically working at the time, and then eventually after Saturation's success, they were able to work on the band full time. The spotlight was on them, and they were just making song after song, and it was great. They were developing a strong fan base due to their stage at the game being labeled as a modern-day boy band. After the success of Saturation 1 and 2 that same year in 2017, they began to work on their final album in the trilogy that ironically was called at the time the Final Brockhampton Project. I will come back to how this is ironic at the very end of the video. I will tie it with a bow at the very end. People were speculating if they really were done after this album. What were they gonna do after creating two pretty banger amazing albums, yet deciding to end the hype train before it had even taken off? Either way, people were down to hear this album, whether if it was the actual last BH album or not. And was it truly their last album? What did that even mean? Well, no, obviously it wasn't their last album, as they would make Irdescense the following year. Again, I will come back to that later. Let's just get to the breakdown on Saturation 3. Boogie. Boogie continues the tradition of every single song in the Saturation trilogy beginning with a banger, and Boogie does not disappoint. My first time hearing Brockhampton and seeing them perform was actually them performing the song in Times Square in full blue makeup, inspired by the movie Big Fat Liar. If you watch the Saturation documentary and watch the segment on them creating Boogie, as soon as they made the beat on the track, they all started dancing and popping off from excitement. The song is basically a We Made It song in Brockhampton's discography, and it slaps. Kevin is stating in the chorus that he's down to break the rules, he is down to do things that you aren't supposed to do when someone gets famous. He is going to stay real when the spotlight is on him. Ameer then bursts in with his iconic hype-building verse.
My niggas taking over. Brockhampton, call your mama. My niggas going platinum. Right next to you to the doctor.
The going platinum bar is a little ironic, knowing now that Ameer wasn't in the group by the time Brockhampton would eventually go platinum. Breakneck Send You to the Doctor is straight up a reference to Joba's verse on Heat that kicked off the Saturation trilogy, where Joba says, "I'll break your neck so you can watch your back." Kevin then transitions back and drops a One Direction bar, which is pretty common in Brockhampton's discography. Matt then comes in with his verse. And then Joba comes back and calls back to Ameer, referencing him, saying, This is clearly a reference to the song Heat, where Joba says if he breaks their neck, they better watch their backs. Merlin drops a verse referencing that before he was famous, nobody wanted anything to do with him. Don McLennan drops the final verse before going back to Kevin's chorus, stating, Dom simply stating that he's gonna do things till the day he dies, whether it's in Brockhampton or maybe in other avenues, other ways of doing music, whatever. Finally ending the song going back to Kevin's chorus. All in all, this is one of Brockhampton's most well-known bangers and has been a major part of their band and just who they are to this day. Zipper is another energetic banger that talks about Brockhampton's rise to success and how they haven't forgotten where they've came from. Several members discuss their past and their celebrity status and judgment they face from people around them. The song was teased by Kevin during an Instagram Live just weeks before Saturation 3's release. Its music video was released exclusively on the Brockhampton app, and it captures a reflection of multiple members rapping their verses, literally reflecting on their rise to fame. The title Zipper comes from the video game Little Big Planet, where it features a character named Sackboy, who's a Sackboy character who is literally held together by a zipper. Zipper samples a melody of Little Big Planet's soundtrack, which samples the song Call It Fate, Call It Karma off the Strokes' 2013 album Come Down Machine. The best way I can describe this beat is saying it feels like a theme to a villain from a video game or Despicable Me. The sample backs a high-pitched synth that drives the song's main melody, and Zipper begins with his verse from Joba that discusses his success, mental state, and inability to adapt to the conventional life. He begins with a reference to his varied vocal style and energy portrayed throughout the Saturation trilogy in songs like Heat and Face. Joba continues, and he's most likely referencing Mr. Monopoly as a character, a symbol of Joba's wealth. But while Joba seems focused on success, he still sees the bigger picture. Joba switches his flow to use more imagery to talk about rejecting more normal life. And here Joba describes trashing a suit and some dress shoes, a metaphor for rejecting the typical 9-to-5 business world. But even though he's successful as a musician, Joba feels he's still not accepted. He talks about smoking cigars, a habit he alludes on the song Johnny, and he also alludes to Kevin's Abstract's verse on Gummy. But Joba doesn't apologize for himself. He acknowledges that others won't accept him. The line "Neighbors Hate" is inspired by his experiences living at Brockhampton House, as shown in the series American Boy Band. Dom picks up things with a short verse. He references the Nintendo Switch game, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Dom suggests that fame has changed him, and despite all the other warnings from everything in his life. Zipper then breaks into Kevin's chorus, which is the song's main high point, with an energetic delivery and really addictive chorus. Here, Kevin expresses that he's here to stay with the boys and they haven't forgot about their beginnings. They float on their success like Aladdin on his magic carpet. And just like the movie Aladdin, the boys started from nothing before finding their own way out. The back half of Zipper shows two verses from Matt and Merlin that continue the song's main theme, with the band transitioning from nothing to something. Matt's verse contains a lot of heavy wordplay.
Noise of a possum. Bitch, I'm a king, I was born in a castle. Built like a bustle, I'm ready to tussle. Fuck on my baby, I'm ready to bust one. Come flow with me and my dogs. Hate on my ass like a lounge. That boy say lie like a cheerleader. She want me feel like a true leader. Beat it up, then watch it ricochet off. Then I skirt off on that Michelin off. They don't got nothing on me till I pop. They don't got nothing on me, call it cops. I hit that run like a hoverboard running back. Look at that boy, hit that running back.
Matt still drives around in a shitty beat-up old car, but despite this, Matt compares himself to royalty. Matt begins a football analogy saying that boys stay light like a cheerleader, suggesting he remains easygoing despite being able to take others down. He later continues and says he deals with negativity and brushes it off. He brings things back to his car, a way to float past his doubters. This line builds on a verse that Matt had on Saturation 2's Gummy. Matt continues by claiming his haters can't touch him, and then he evades them like a football player running back. Merlin's verse is a personal highlight of this song in general. He reminisces on the days of living in San Marcos and where he was addicted to soft-shell tacos. This is a reference to their earlier mixtapes like All American Trash, where they developed as artists and making Brockhampton a brand was in this San Marcos apartment. Merlin details the group's struggles, saying they got down to pennies and ramen noodles. The boys were broke during this time, as Joba describes on his verse on Saturation 2's Sweet. But Merlin implies that the struggle helped them become successful, continuing that, "Now I see how hunger makes a shooter, stamina, stamina." The line "stamina, stamina" references one of Brockhampton's taglines, the hardest working boy band in the business. Merlin closes this section of this verse by remembering when he had to help film for the group, saying he was the one holding the camera. But the cameras are now pointed at them now. After the band's breakout projects, Saturation 1 and 2, Merlin acknowledges this in his line, implying that he's hit a glass ceiling. He continues referencing the Cortana character on Xbox's Halo franchise, a godlike AI who guides the players throughout their game. Merlin reminds us that his name and recognizability, comparing himself to Carlos Santana, and comparing Brockhampton to a 90s rap collective like Wu-Tang Clan. Merlin continues with a double entendre and the absolute classic line, "Head was clean, Tony Fantano." This is of course a reference to the music critic Anthony Fantano himself. Fantano has posted positive reviews of Saturation 1 and 2 on his channel, The Needle Drop, and then he responded to this exact verse on Saturation 3.
And on Saturation 3, Merlin says my fucking name? What
Definitely Brockhampton and Anthony Fantano had a little bit of a relationship as like being friends, so it's kind of a little funny.
The internet's biggest music nerd. And, like, you actually buff too. I see why you mean you big, like, you big too. Like,
I can't say all this shit and like not be able to stand up for myself.
Merlin ends his verse with a hilarious reference to the model and celebrity Bella Hadid. Made her a wife, she can't kick it, so she Bella. This is referencing a interview Bella did with Pop Culture Magazine, Complex.
And I don't mind dirty sneakers, but they better be fresh, you know? If Homeboy's coming through with these, it's quiet. Yeah, no, it's quiet for him. But like if he comes through in like these, you got some Air Maxes out here, you got some Jordans, Homeboy's gonna like, get it.
Zipper is one of the many highlights in Saturation 3, continuing the album's opening string of charismatic bangers. It probably has one of the best hooks on the album. Johnny is an existential banger. Johnny's main production begins with a saxophone sample, with Kevin's chorus leading the song. After Kevin's chorus, it begins with his verse. The metaphor is a play on the idea that McDonald's doesn't normally sell curly fries. Kevin differs from the average person, whether it's his own creative ambitions or his own sexuality, which Kevin has referred to many times throughout his music, where he mentions the struggles of being gay in America. Could have gotten a deal if I wanted, but I like owning shit. This is a reference to in the Viceland documentary, where Kevin reaches a brief moment where he had to decide whether to sign with a label or see more growth as an artist on his own, where maybe he would have less control of his own creative output if he signed with this label, something that most artists end up struggling with. The song then transitions to Dom also saying, Dom is reminiscing on his high school years, but later saying that he wanted more out of life. Dom has referenced on previous songs in their discography that he was overweight and depressed, and on the song Trip off of Saturation 1, stating that his family was full of athletes and he was kind of chubby. Kevin then returns and states, Kevin being a big fan of Harry Styles, and his love even extended to his profile picture on the Kanye Titha forum, the actual website that members of Brockhampton would eventually meet up on. Ameer then transitions to I let you know the dog, I ain't the catalog, but really no, I'm alone, cause I don't stick around, and yes, I know it's my fault, so put your finger down. Ameer feels isolated, but he knows that sometimes being alone can be caused by yourself. Then transitioning to Matt, saying, I would keep this shit pent up, if it weren't for my mom, if it weren't for your job, yeah, I don't let you lie, guess it sounded at once, should've opened up my mouth more, show them what a piss for, let them get a piss for, cut up in the nuts, man, red running bands, switch killers on bed stand, black eyes, bloody sheet, there with your feet stand, we should get a new plan. Matt's verse begins with him thanking his mom and Dijon. Dijon being a close collaborator with Brockhampton, also bringing up his mom, which has been mentioned a lot in Matt's verses on the earlier Saturation albums. Matt then begins saying that he wishes he stood up for himself more. He wishes he could have fought people who deserved it. Joba's verse brings a lot of emotional energy to the track. Joba himself tweeting that he can't listen to the song casually due to how emotional it is. Joba's dog passes away and he goes through a breakup at the same time. While these things are happening, Joba is trying to get ahead in life and quit drugs and alcohol. But despite this, he isn't able to do it.
I'm destined to fall apart when I'm depressed. It's all a test, we make God from my best side. I blew my hands together, life's got me hard time. There's no applause in the game of life, I just bought a car and a new house. Here's the cost to prove it. I spend a little real when I'm feeling moody, and that's like all the time. Try not to mind the plot, because my heart is ticking. I smoke a pack a day and I wish I did. Having some trouble with it. I have a couple vices, we had that show of life. Most of the time I'm hitting, anxious and patient, and always wanting something different. I hate the way I'm feeling, I'm sick of chasing feelings.
Joba states that he is depressed and things feel like they're all over the place, like it's a test. Stating when things go south, we always turn to God for answers. He used the metaphor of gluing his hands together. Life has him hogtied, which means he's left immobile and helpless, commonly applied to pigs before cooking the animal during a pig roast. The metaphor of gluing his hands together is incredible writing because he's basically stating that even when he prays, he still feels like he's subjected to the worst in life. And the hogtied metaphor is using a pig. This is to show that when pigs are roasted, their hands are tied together, similar to when you're praying. Then stating that there's no applause in the game of life, saying how there's just little reward in general for when putting in a lot of work, whether if people just want a car or a house or a girlfriend, but at the end of the day, people feel empty even when they get all of the things they want. Joba states also that he spins a little wheel when he's feeling moody. This could be a bar referencing his potential suicidal thoughts. Whether it's spinning a chamber of a revolver, or it's simply a game show wheel, or even a fidget spinner. This could also be a reference to how life is just a set of choices that can change your direction and where you're going. He states that he's anxious, impatient, and he hates the way of feeling that he's tired of chasing feelings. This verse might feel like it's off-kilter that someone would just be this honest in a rap verse, but what Joba is stating is something that a lot of people end up going through throughout their lives. Whether it's the feeling of loneliness or being anxious or not even feeling like life is going their way. I respect Joba for dropping a verse like this, and it's probably one of his most memorable verses on this album. Liquid is the fourth song on Saturation 3, an interlude which begins a similarity to previous Brockhampton songs like Tupac and Teeth. It opens with a short verse from Ameer Vann who says,
I grew up all alone, my mom and dad fighting. I moved around a lot, I did a lot of fighting.
Ameer has talked about his role models and their problematic behavior on previous songs like Fight. It's a common theme throughout his verses in the Saturation Trilogy. Ameer credits the changes in his life to meeting Ian Simpson, aka Kevin Abstract. Kevin and Ameer met during high school and basically grew up together, and Ameer seems to credit their music with turning his life around. Dom hops in with his own lines.
Watch my uncles duck indictments. I'm used to ramen noodles, victims of mental illness, products in neighborhoods.
Referencing his previous struggles in poverty, social anxiety, body dysmorphia, and Dom's past inspired him to create a website. It's a community for self-expression, even writing about his experiences throughout his life to a letter to a fan. My social anxiety is worse than ever, but I feel brave and strong enough to face it, knowing that people who support me love me for who I am. It makes stepping on that stage when I'm not feeling perfect myself all the much better, because you all give me the strength to feel like the person who has a life worth living. I want to end this letter by giving you all something that I also wish I had when I was younger. A space. I'll be putting a link below to a free anonymous chat where you can have the freedom to discuss whatever topics you want. Kevin's ad-libs finish Dom's verse. Kevin says remembering the band's transition to San Marcos to South Central and their rise to fame. Merlin picks things up with his wordplay. He references the Saturation 1 song Heat. On Heat, Ameer raps, "I got pipe dreams and crack rocks and stripper poles." And Merlin has discussed selling dope on the song Milk, claiming he chose music instead. Matt then comes in with his own part on the song, talking about he was running with kids in Texas who were chewing tobacco. He hints that his good looks got their mom's attention. Cigar Fidel Castro car full of Castro. He's got money now, he smokes Cuban cigars and drives a nice car. A Dom ad-lib finishes Matt's verse, talking about he's looking past while swimming in the money. He says, "I see the sunset when I backstroke, can't swim but I can act though." Dom hints that he doesn't really know wealth, but he can at least try to act the part. Kevin finishes the song with an outro that is probably the highlight. He uses some nice wordplay to talk about his loneliness as a kid. The verse is pitched up to make him sound like a child. I was playing rock, paper, scissors with imaginary friends. Imagine having no friends. This is a common sentiment from Kevin, especially on Saturation 3. He often talks about being distant from his family and how he struggled to feel comfortable with himself. Kevin also talked about this in interviews, saying it's hard to accept the truth and especially accept yourself. Liquid is only a minute and 23 seconds, but it's notable for its chemistry and overlapping verses that flow into each other and recalling to the title. The song is packed with themes that Brockhampton discussed throughout Saturation 3. The boys detail their past and their talk about forming the band and making music save them from their past hardship. Stupid.
Always wanna play with my cell phone, but I don't want nobody to see what's in it. Always wanna play with my cell phone, but I don't want nobody to see what's in it.
An interesting thing about Stupid is we actually can see the process of them making the song for the first time. The original name for the song was actually going to be Until the name was changed during the later half of the album cycle. And because their literal 45-minute video of them making this in a room, showcasing how they made this song, but let's just get into it. This song is just a banger. It's pretty easy to say. It goes hard.
I just came up with a hit, man. An IG daddy just came up with dick, man. I'm out the wall, collecting coins like I'm patched, man. He's on the mud, then I'm my boss, I can't stop this.
Then it transitions to Ameer and Matt. Matt Champion is ad-libbing What Drug reference in the background. It's a reference to how Ameer is known for mainly talking about drugs in his music. Then Ameer follows up by saying he's going higher up on the ladder in the industry, saying he's a real dog, but we all go to heaven. It's ironic because many Christians believe that animals don't actually go to heaven. finishing his verse by saying he's in a big house now, his lifestyle has improved between Saturation 1, 2, and now 3. But he feels claustrophobic, which is most likely due to him being seen more in the public eye now. Matt then comes in stating, beginning his verse with a Magic the Gathering reference, with a heart like a Supreme Phantom, which is a card where, quote, his knowledge is kept when his heart stops beating, probably referring to the fact that if Matt dies, his music will exist and live on for him. Daddy Crackin' Red Rum being a reference to The Shining as well. I just want my shit to fit tailored just like Tiffany. Eagle-eyed viewers of Saturation documentary especially will notice that that exact bar was a bar that Matt had in another beat shown in the Saturation documentary, but eventually it found its home on Stupid. Kevin comes in with his chorus, which if you see the making of Stupid video that was live streamed by Kevin, it's still on YouTube. Kevin made the chorus in literally under 4 minutes when Romil started making the beat. This is the first thing that made it onto the song.
Boys wanna play with my cell phone, but I don't want nobody to see what's in it.
The ad-libs in the chorus are of course from Merlin. Dom then continues on with his own verse. Burner is slang used by police to describe an unregistered firearm. Dom states that he doesn't discriminate, but he's also aiming a metaphorical gun. I ain't no apologist, meaning that Dom knows their music is breaking boundaries, and he also knows that some things are just against the status quo of the music industry. And Dom isn't apologetic for what he's doing in the band. Then saying that don't stop the professionals if you still move like novices, meaning if you don't know what you're doing, then don't try to step up on him. Kevin then continues with his own verse.
America's favorite, I do my and they hate it. It's like I'm stuck in the matrix, and they stuck on their day shit. Or they stuck on their day shit. I love my boyfriend's fragrance. You know what I'm talking about, what goes on in my dirty mouth. Boys be on that silly shit, so Billy about to air him out.
Beginning with overall sarcasm at first, then stating he's stuck in the matrix, meaning that time is out of touch with reality, and he doesn't feel comfortable with it. While other people worry about some things, Kevin is different, stating that he went from nothing to sleeping on John's couch, being a reference to when his come up as an artist, John being the group's manager, helped him out a lot. His final bar on the verse being a reference to the Billy Star movie, which we can maybe talk about it in its own video, to be honest, because it probably deserves its own video. The song then ends with the chorus closing out the song. Fun fact, in an Instagram live recently, Ameer Vann came out and said this is his favorite song to make and to be a part of making with Brockhampton. He said he still listens to this song to this day. You'll notice that Kevin is helping a lot of the members write their verses and encouraging them in the Instagram live video that was recorded and put on YouTube. Also another fun fact, because you know I'm the fun facts guy, Joba actually had a verse on this song about being ashamed of being white, but it didn't make the final cut of the song, and you can see it in the Saturation documentary.
Don't think I'm racist. Don't blame them either. Can't fuck with most my people neither. I'm ashamed to be a whitey at times. Defined by generation. Way before my time. Hate crimes. Crooked politicians. Neo-Nazis. Racist institutions. Pass down the line to the children. And to the children of different colors. A vicious cycle so disheartening. Take the hate down to my skin.
That's crazy.
Bleach is the premiere track off the album. And it's by far the most popular track on Saturation 3 and their second most popular song in their entire discography. To this day, the song has gone gold without even a proper music video to go along with the song, so that's pretty impressive. Bleach is a sad banger. The verses are more introspective while the beat sways from a chaotic self-analysis mixed with sadness and melancholy. The song begins with an infectious chorus from Ryan Beatty, a close friend of Kevin Abstract who has had his own successful solo career as an artist, even on the early days of YouTube. The song transitions to a verse from every member in the group, this being the first song in their entire discography to do so. First starting one from Matt.
I can't take it back. Feel like a monster, feel like a dance. I've been feelings you ain't want me, I ain't giving up. You should set it up, tell me time's up. Let the water run, let my body run.
Matt's verse is speaking upon his feelings of being out of place, whether it's in a relationship that he's in or just in general. Even referencing the movie Deadheads, which revolves around a zombie apocalypse, Matt is trying to run past his past actions that he's done in his life. This overall feels better than confronting the issues he actually has. Then after Ryan's chorus returning, Merlin gives his own verse. Merlin is simply stating how life on tour and trying to have a relationship can contradict each other. It also is interesting to note that while on tour, the group will play Kanye West's Bound 2 over Merlin's verse specifically, which Kanye being a major inspiration for the group, since even their days of meeting up on the Kanye West fan forum. Ameer comes in with his own very introspective verse.
I found false hope in all kind of places, hotel rooms and temporary feelings. I put my clothes on and try to check out. I try to hide from the sun, let it set now. Don't let God see me. I got a lot of demons and I've been sleeping with them. And now I'm tangled in the sheets and sinking deeper with them. I'm going deeper in it, find me drowning with them.
Ameer is stating how flawed of a human he is, whether it's the fact that he chooses to indulge himself in sex, and then he tries to hide himself from God because of the mistakes and issues that he chooses to do. It's kind of an ironic verse for what he would end up getting kicked out of the group for, but that's not the point, I guess. Either way, stating that he finds himself drowning in his own problems, whether it's drugs or sex, and then trying to turn the other cheek and hide his problems from God or other people. Then Don McLennan comes in.
They ask me, do you make mistakes or do you make a change? Or do you draw the line for when it's bad days? We taste the wind for when it's cold and like to kill our flame. Who's to blame? They ask me, do you make mistakes or do you make a change? Or do you draw the line for when it's bad days? We taste the wind for when it's cold enough to kill our flame. I wonder who's to blame.
Dom on the demo version of Bleach, shown in the Things We Lost in the Fire, showed that Dom's verse was originally a lot longer on this song, but a very Brockhampton thing to do is to simply cut part of the verse and make that to the focus for what the member's going to be saying, which is what they did with Dom's verse on Bleach. This verse is an incredibly deep bar. It pretty much speaks for itself. Do you make mistakes or do you make a change? Do we do what's right for us or do we swallow our pride and talk about it another time? Probably one of the best parts of the song right here. Then transitioning to a beat switch that swells up the song, beginning with Joba. Joba is referring to the fact that no matter what he does, there will always be problems that emerge from his life choices. Everywhere he goes, he feels out of place, and that people don't understand him. Either way, he's trying to figure it out. Then Kevin Abstract comes in and says, the theme of the passport would be used again in future songs in their discography, like their most popular song, 2019's Sugar. Kevin is most likely referring to how he is escaping reality while he can enjoy the sky and forget about everything else. The beat then climaxes even more, then bringing in Bareface. Bareface is stating no matter how this person looks, he will always be there for them, saying that all the angels stare, obviously saying how angelic of a person this truly is. This is one of the most important songs probably on the album and maybe even in their discography, as not only does every single member kill it on this song, they're all bringing their own different perspectives on love, self-actualization, introspection, and many more. This is probably one of their best songs that they've made for sure, and it's probably one of their most important moments as a band. Alaska. Alaska brings back Saturation 3's familiar themes of fame and success. Each member brings their own perspective on their past and where they've headed. It features additional writing and production by Bareface, and it's one of the few Saturation-era songs without a verse from Don McLennan. Alaska uses several samples, most notably in MC's Solar song. Ameer kicks off the song with a verse about his rise to fame.
I used to work for people. I made a couple $100, wasn't worth it even. I'm worth 100,000, not dollars but diamonds.
He talks about growing up poor, saying, I used to work for people. I made a couple $100, wasn't worth it even. Ameer focuses on the harsher parts of his upbringing throughout his verse. Ameer's lyrics are often filled with biblical references. And on Alaska, Ameer drops hints that he got his hands dirty on his way to success. He expands on this line later in the song as well. Ameer realizes how far he's come and how he feels out of place and longs for home. Ameer left the ghetto with dreams of making money, but now that he's successful, he realizes he doesn't even know all the things his money can buy. Kevin picks up with Alaska's second verse, where he discusses his relentlessness and energy to make art. There's a lot of references to how hard the boys work, like a reference to Brockhampton and how they often make music very quickly, at night, or in the dark. Shown throughout the Saturation documentary, Kevin continues to talk about his passion for making music, name-dropping Facebook's co-founder Mark Zuckerberg. He concludes his verse by talking about growing up in the ghetto, reminding people how close he is to his brothers, and threatening to call out any haters on future songs. Joba enters a melodic bridge that remembers his troubled past and looking forward to the future. Joba's bridge flows into another verse from Kevin, who continues talking about grinding out songs and finally finding success. But Kevin emerges from these memories with a new perspective. He's successful now, and looking back, he inspires him through these tough kicks off a beat switch driven by a sample from the song Ignorant by producer Whipped Cream. Matt Champion closes the song with a verse about self-love. He starts by saying he's never followed convention, with references to Goldilocks and Three Bears and Ozzy Osbourne show, and he's being true to himself. He continues on how he doesn't care about other people's opinions and he thinks for himself, and he's happy doing that. Matt seems to pin his success on not caring on what other people think about him. He concludes about a few lines in, saying that they're come up from being broke to dropping out of Lone Star College into making himself into a musician. Alaska features verses from several members in Brockhampton, discussing what their fame means to them. For Ameer, it's a way out of poverty. For Kevin, it's a result of his creative ambition and his overall obsession with making art. For Joba, it's about reinventing yourself, and for Matt, it's knowing it's okay to be yourself despite what other people say.
This is like our boy band Poppy song. Sorry I lost my voice. If you know the words, sing it with us, okay?
Let's go. Put my fries in the truck. If you're thinking of me now, that's it. If you're thinking of me now, that's it.
Hottie is a song about uncertainty and being able to deal with their insecurities and how they use their friends and lovers to try to escape stresses that exist in their lives. The song is produced by Jabbar Emanuel, who stated that this song and Liquid were the hardest songs to produce for the album. The song begins with Kevin saying, "Putting the bag in a cup," most likely referring to tea, Kevin explaining that he just needs friends with him and they will add it up or increase their net value with money. Dom continues with his verse.
I should build up my consciousness. Voices feeling so ominous. I can place a bid for you. They mark it out as anonymous. I'm a shit don't got to need it. They help you round up some confidence. Think about all the consequence. Gotta try to bring some monotony.
Joba then stating he wants to be rewound because of his past mistakes that he's done in his life.
How could I be better? I paid the price in full just to clear the record. Rewound just to fast forward. Hands up! Hands up! Hands up! Let's go!
Now he wants to move forward with things, the 8th track being a really old way to listen to music. He also uses this metaphor to say that he wants to rewind his life, stating also that he stole it from his grandma. Then Merlin states he wishes he had a rocket, and he wishes he wasn't feeling as small.
Let's go! Can I stop and quit? Can I stop and quit? Man, I wish I had a rocket. Was I active? Microscopic? Was my back was telepathic? But instead I'm always battling. No running like it's sing this shit out.
Even though he sort of enjoys his rise to fame and mentions it on many other songs on Saturation, Merlin still feels out of place. He feels like he wishes he was telepathic because he wants to be able to understand people better. He states that rapping is his one true love and explains how stressful a tour can be, but at the end of the day it's all worth it because he's truly doing what he loves to do. After going back, it continues to Kevin's chorus again, and then the song has another verse from Joba. Joba is stating how hard it is for him to be himself at times. Someone is calling him, but he ignores the person's calls. Despite all his flaws, he tries to be a better person day by day. Matt Champion comes in with a bridge before transitioning to Kevin's chorus again that ends out the song.
I just wanna know where the party at. It's up, 24/7 thinking about you. I just wanna know where we living for. It's up, 24/7 thinking about shit.
All in all, Hottie is a big fan favorite song for a lot of people. It's a very simple but very well done song, and the chorus is really catchy. The verses show the group's level of introspection that they have had throughout their lives and how they're trying to be better people with their fans, their own relationships, and friends.
Bag in the cup, add it up. Put my friends in the truck, add it up. If you're thinking of me now, that's enough. If you're thinking of me now, that's enough.
Sister Nation. Sister Nation is two halves of a song, the first half being Sister, which is a straight up chaotic banger. The production is very much in tune with something that would be made in the 2018 album Irdescense. The production is very chaotic and disorderly. Not in a bad way though, the song is a straight up banger. The song begins with Merlin Wood stating, "I don't listen to what the blogs tell me," most likely a reference to publications that were critical of the earlier Saturation projects, most likely referring to Pitchfork, which Brockhampton has said on many occasions even at live shows.
On a count of 3, can you guys help us say, fuck Pitchfork? Fuck Pitchfork! 1, 2, 3! Fuck Pitchfork! 1, 2, 3! Fuck Pitchfork!
Ironically, they seem to have a decent relationship with the group now, as they now basically have themselves by the balls, and Brockhampton has done content for Pitchfork as of writing this in 2021. But yeah, it's a little ironic, as Pitchfork straight up shat on the earlier albums that they were putting out, giving Saturation 1 a 6.5. Joba then comes in with his own verse.
But you would never know. I like to hide so much I lose myself. That's why I'm here to song. A psychopath to others. And grew up in counseling. Flipping off my counselors. They gave me food stabilizers. But when I came off them, I was violent. Took the drugs that I wanted, which didn't help with the voices. They just grew louder and louder.
And the documentary, you can actually tell what the censored word that Joba is saying, and it's actually problems. Censoring the word naturally makes viewers make their own conclusion on what the censored word is actually supposed to be. Joba is overall stating that he has some psychological issues that he tries to hide, and he's pure to some but a psycho to others. Joba also mentioning the downsides of taking medication to try to stop his issues. When he got off them, it just made him more violent and have outbursts. This verse is mainly trying to match the overall level of mania that begins to build up in the track, and then it transitions to an interlude in Spanish from Roberto, which translates to, "I'm so fed up and exhausted I cannot keep doing this. I wish I could give up, but I have to stay strong for my friends and family." Roberto is stating that he's feeling lost and on the verge of giving up, but he's going to continue for the people close to him, and then the beat just straight up goes off, transitioning to Kevin saying, Kevin is reminiscing about his past and stating the success after Saturation 1 and 2, and he's remembering that his mom had to save the minutes on his cell phone plan. Kevin dropped out of school as well, but yet he still had big dreams and he looked up to people like Russell Simmons, who was the co-founder of Def Jam. In fact, when Kevin was really young, he almost got signed up by Def Jam and mentions in the Viceland documentary that he was so ambitious that when he was young, as a kid, he would call up record companies looking to speak to the higher-ups at the company to try to get signed. This is Kevin's moment. This moment goes to all the people who thought Kevin and Brockhampton wouldn't go anywhere. This goes to the people who saw Kevin growing up and overall just showing the growth of the group and how quickly they've come out of nowhere in 2017. Matt then comes in with a very smooth verse. As the group has gotten more prominent, Matt sees the fake people that are out there. This is a big reason why the group declined signing with major labels early in their careers. They wanted to build a solid fan base before deciding to sign with a major label, which would eventually happen the following year. Despite all this though, Brockhampton have gained their trust from their fans and they're trusting their own guns. His final bars in this verse meaning that he's tired of all the fake people that act like they made it when they truly haven't made it, saying, "Keep your mouth where the money at." The song transitions to a very beautiful moment by Dom.
Everybody got me fucked up, I'm struggling on how to move now. Yellow lights on my dashboard, red flags in the rear view. I know I wouldn't make you upset, but all I wanna do is hear you. You know that lately I'm feeling straight, but really I don't know what to do now. Cause everybody got me fucked up, I'm struggling on how to move now. 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 I'm struggling on how to move now.
Dom is stating that he's made some mistakes in his life and some of his failing relationships. Yellow lights on the dashboard meaning he is seeing the problems that are in front of him. Red flags in the rear view meaning he isn't looking at the actual issues that are in front of him, which is a deep bar because these lights are meant to reference traffic light. He really wants to see a person for who they are despite causing some problems for himself. He then states that he knows he made her upset, but he wants to make things work. He's struggling to move on and he can't keep it straight. It's in a pretty explosive moment on the song, and Dom will actually scream his verse during some of the live performances, showing that this means a lot to him. Dom is having trouble embracing the facts in a failing relationship that he sees in front of him. Shortly after, the song transitions to Nation, the second half of the song, beginning with a verse from Kevin. Being treated differently because he's black. This overall is a large theme on a lot of Ameer's verses. Similar themes also being mentioned on Saturation 2 songs like Teeth and Fight. Then stating that he got suspended when he was younger, and he would learn that he would be treated differently because of his skin color. Also stating that he began to second guess some of his decisions even when he was a young kid. Dom's verses begin with stating how the trouble of growing up in the American school system, where he would use just the flow to having no place. All the books on my backs made my bones ache. Dom then wonders where the world will be if he had no face, no skin, no heart, no physical distinguishable traits. When he would have these thoughts, his father would tell him he was soft and he needed to toughen up. He looks in the law and he sees that the problem is that he's black. For the blogs like Pitchfork, they just see him as another story. His words are another paycheck. In the eyes of the world, he's an icon, but to himself, he hasn't started yet. He wants more out of life. He continues his verse again, stating the overall power that he has. It's a very powerful Dom verse, by the way. Merlin then states a very iconic bridge. Before finishing, Kevin states, which overall the song is very chaotic, but in a very Brockhampton fashion, they managed to finish the track very somberly. The first half, Sister received an orchestral strings remix when they were signed by RCA during the following tours that played the song. It adds a much different feel to Sister, and it's probably one of my favorite songs to see them perform live from this album. Ameer supposedly had some bars that were supposed to be on the first half of Sister, but they didn't make the final cut of the song.
For the congregation, I shake the fucking earth. I grew up in the heat on 37th Street. I'm the shadow of death when you fall asleep. I'm a living God, no need for confirmation. I move the congregation, I shake the fucking earth. I grew up in the heat on 37th Street.
The only remnants of these bars are brief snippets seen in the Saturation documentary. It isn't uncommon for Brockhampton to have many cuts, many alternate versions of other songs that don't make the final cut. Rental. Rental is one of the few tracks receiving an actual music video during the Saturation 3 era. This is probably the most fan-favorite song on the album. The music video begins with Roberto saying, "My name is Roberto, and this is the end of an era. Thank you all very much. I love you all very much." The song begins with a verse from Kevin Abstract.
Keep a white girl with a fine nigga. I want a shirt that make my body feel all sexy. I want a chain that make my body feel all hefty. I want to hang around now when I walk at the door. See that shit? Riding on the roof with a dollar sign attached to my head. See that shit?
Riding on the roof with a dollar sign attached to my head, most likely referring to Kevin Abstract, is heading to sort of an era of euphoria in his life. The dollar sign on his head meaning that he's now become more profitable as the year has gone by due to the success of the Saturation trilogy. Then Dom comes in with his own verse. Dom wants to fall in love, but also avoid the potential drama that could happen with falling in love. Overall, it feels that his verse is stating his overall insecurities that come with relationships, and how he can try and quell and express these anxieties. Not enough trust to believe, not enough feeling to care. I'm feeling numb to the world, so I've been ignoring it instead. Most likely referring to how over time you can feel disconnected from others, where you stop caring and you start to feel lost, feeling overall numb to the world, so you ignore everything else. Then transitioning to arguably Matt's most memorable part on the album. Throw me in the fire, baby, I'll survive. Coming top down by the seaside, Matt is implying that if something were to happen to him or his love, he will survive. If he had his heart broken, he can survive. Coming top down by the seaside, most likely referring to a vehicle having their top down, so you can feel the wind and feel free. Matt is feeling like he's on the top of the world with this one. Later, it transitions to Matt in a higher octave than he normally is known for singing in, saying, job that he was at. He states how he has grown since these days, and now he's living at a higher standard of living. But despite learning these lessons, he still feels a level of emptiness, using drugs to try and fill a void, something he has stated many times throughout Brockhampton. A rare appearance of Ashlyn Gray, the group's photographer, comes in with a verse that is made to parody some of the common criticisms of the Saturation Trilogy. Members like Kevin, Ameer, and Merlin, then stating a common criticism of Brockhampton's first Saturation albums, received a lot of critics because how different and off-brand their music tends to be, and how the average hip-hop listener might not enjoy their music. Like, for example, the Dead End Hip Hop channel on YouTube stated that Brockhampton music was not the music you put on in the car. Then Matt Champion comes in with a chorus where he reminisces about his past, and then transitions to Joba's chorus. Cinema 1, 2, and 3. Saturation 3 brings back Roberto for a 3-track interlude titled Cinema 1, Cinema 2, and Cinema 3. These cinema tracks, along with skit and scene tracks that have been seen on early Saturation albums, are linked to the band's music videos. Kevin explained in 2017, saying, "Can you guys please listen to the skits? You will understand Roberto, the entire album, and his story if you watch these videos again. Okay, bye." Throughout the videos and interlude tracks, Roberto meets the Brockhampton crew and is getting caught up in his life with crime and fame. In the intro to Face music videos, the boys destroy their house. This symbolizes the boys leaving their old lives behind. They've torn down their past and now there's no turning back. Roberto mentions this in the Trilogy's opening interlude skit. His interlude throughout the Saturation Trilogy reveals his doubts and insecurity that he has. Saturation 2's scene track ties back to his theme of Roberto and the boys robbing a bank in the Gummy music video, and it's later interrogated by the police in the Swamp music video. Throughout his lines, Roberto talks about loneliness and how he misses his family. In Cinema 1, it roughly translates to, "I had a blast here, despite the fact that I made some mistakes. Gunpowder and accidents. Christmas is never the best time for me. Oh God, I miss my family. Sometimes I go out and check out the planes and they fly over my house. I light a cigarette and stare at the ground, keeping my head down for the next few days with my shoes tied. But anyways, we're almost done, guys. We're almost done." Here, Roberto drops references to gunpowder and accidents to throw back to blowing up their house in previous music videos. He again longs for the comfort of his family. He seems lonely, but he tells the boys that they're almost there. This is connected with Saturation 3's themes of success and making it in the music industry and what that means to them. Roberto is stating that despite all these struggles, uncertainty, and loneliness, they're finally seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Cinema 2 expresses familiar sentiments of not fitting in and leaving behind a quieter, more conventional life, roughly translating to, "I don't want to drink water today. I don't want to walk through the neighborhood and see how perfect the world is. I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to stand in front of my house and see how it sinks into my flames. I wish I could ask my friends to get out. I wish I could have saved them one by one, but everything is gone. I often ask myself if I'm the next one. Summer, I'm sorry. Roberto again is referencing blowing up his house, leaving back his old life. His doubt for saturation is now replaced with remorse that he couldn't convince more of his friends to follow the path. The reference to Summer at the very end is possibly a reference to Summer, a character that is in the Billy Star documentary. The final interlude, Cinema 3, is an extended prayer for guidance. Heavenly Father, I am a humble servant. I present you my need for hope. There are many times when I feel powerless. There are times when I feel weak. I pray for hope. I need hope for the future. I need hope for a better life. I need hope for love and kindness. Some say that the sky gets darker just before the light. I pray for that to be true, because everything seems dark. I need your light, Lord, in every way. I pray and filled with your life from head to toe, to enjoy your glory and to know that everything is fine in the world, as you planned it and how you want to be. Help me walk in your life and live my life in faith and glory. And in your name I pray, Amen. Cinema 3 summarizes the sentiments that Roberto expresses throughout the trilogy. He confesses feelings of powerlessness and doubt and asking for help. He needs God's light to lift him in the times of darkness. This ironically foreshadows probably some of the themes in Brockhampton's 7th album, Roadrunner, which references the light. Roberto's endured his own struggles, leaving his family and friends with no guarantees of success, working tirelessly to push through the Saturation Trilogy and finally make it in the music industry. Cinema 3's prayer suggests that this is showing the struggles in God's light. Team. Team is the closer for Saturation 3 and the trilogy altogether. In line with the other albums, this song ends with Bareface being heavily featured on the track. The reason why the song is named Team was because Brockhampton was working on a future album at the time that eventually got scrapped that was actually called Team Effort. The song is split in two halves, the first half being Bareface singing to a girl named Ebony, which is what the first half of the song is commonly referred to as. The song is a response to the previous closers on the Saturation Trilogy, Waste and Summer, where each song is a different perspective of a failing relationship. Where on Team, it is the perspective of two mutual cheaters, one being Ebony, who is in one relationship with someone else, but she is cheating on him without him knowing it. Bareface is retorting and reminding her of all the things that she did to try and hide her relationship from her boyfriend, like hiding her neck to cover the hickeys that are left over from her neck. Each closer during the trilogy is about each different perspective from each different person, as a supposed love triangle in a way. Where on Waste, he is singing about being the victim of being cheated on and going through unrequited love. In the film Billy Star, the theme of this song is also one of the main themes of the film, where a girl walks into her boyfriend making out and cheating on her with Kevin Abstract's character, Helmet Boy. A pitched-down version of Team plays in the background while this happens. And the song is incredibly beautiful for a track. Bareface really knocks it out the park on this one, as he performs his chorus in falsetto, which he confirmed at Twitter that he was actually inspired. Bareface really knocks it out the park on this one. This is definitely one of my favorite closers of all time. This song is like incredibly beautiful. But right when you think it's over, there's actually more to the song. The song then transitions to the second half, which is really smooth and has a really nice beat switch. Kevin and Ameer come in and immediately start trading bars. Ameer's final bars in Brockhampton on an official project. We will touch back on that later, but moving on. Then transitioning to Dom with a quick... Amazing songs in general, Team is great, shoutouts to Bareface. I'm a huge Bareface stan on the low. I have the limited edition Roadrunner Bareface CD, so it's pretty obvious that the effects of this album and the trilogy affected everyone in Brockhampton significantly. The band started from literally nothing and made a group into something it previously wasn't in the span of a year, with Saturation 3 being the final album that dropped in the trilogy, and my personal favorite album from them and probably one of my favorite albums of all time. I like how this album masterfully brought up all the aspects from previous two albums that were so good and made it its own thing, basically mastering what they were doing on Sat 2 and 1. The outro on this album is beautiful, and this album is probably one of the few Brockhampton albums where I feel like every member is bringing something interesting to the table. Especially Matt, where on tracks like Rental, he brings a vocal style on that track that he's been yet to replicate to this day. Although Ameer has some decent parts on this album, it's clear he was criticized for having the same flows, but overall I still think he did what he could, as Ameer was still featured heavily on Saturation 1 and 2. Brockhampton would begin to tour at bigger venues because of the success of the trilogy, reviewers like Anthony Fantano giving the trilogy his top 3 album of that year, the whole trilogy, reviewing each album positively as well. So as more people got on board with Brockhampton, this leads to what I said in the beginning of the video. How is this the final Brockhampton album? Well, it isn't, and I'm not one of the people who thought they fell off after the Saturation trilogy, because they didn't. However, it wouldn't come without a cost. Brockhampton would eventually sign with RCA in 2018 and announcing a new album being Team Effort, also being referenced at the closer of Saturation 3 where it was called Team. This album would eventually get scrapped, but then the album would get rebranded as a new album that they would work on for the following months, and that album was called Puppy. Now this project could probably use its own video because yes, I know a lot about Puppy as well, so if you guys want me to cover Puppy in the future, I can, because I know a lot about Puppy. In the beginning of 2018, Ameer Vann would be outed for allegations of sexual abuse from 2 former girlfriends that Ameer had been with. This scandal happened at the height of the Me Too movement. Soon everyone was looking at Brockhampton for their success, but now people were writing about them for this scandal. Not only that, but Brockhampton was working on Puppy at the same exact time. Eventually, Ameer Vann would be removed from the group after a live performance. Their once close friend and founding member, literally the face of the Saturation trilogy, was gone. Also scrapping the album that they were working on, where he was still a part of the group at the time when they were making it, Puppy was scrapped. Now, I could talk about this more in its own video, but this is what I meant to say when I said this is the last Brockhampton album, because it really was the last Brockhampton album in their early form of the group. After this, they were pretty much celebrities. They were being held at a much higher standard, and their status of being a boy band and being in the public eye. It would be Brockhampton's loss of innocence. That's one of the beautiful things about the Saturation trilogy and Sat 3 specifically, is it truly was a project about them just being themselves to the most degree that they possibly could show. You could tell that they were tight with each other, and each member coming in and out of each other's bars, they just were connected as a brotherhood, especially during this trilogy. This would just be the start of Brockhampton as a whole though, as yes, they would lose one of their founding members of the group, the literal face of the trilogy, but they had to move forward, and they certainly did move forward.